The FNRad Snowboarding Podcast is sponsored by Wired Snowboards, a Vancouver-based company with deep roots in snowboarding. The raffle we did last week for a custom graphic wireboard was won by listener Todd Maskovich. Yeah, Toad. I think he wants to put a Slayer album on the top sheet. That's going to be rad. Josh Long won the Dakine Heli Pro 20-liter backpack. Dakine really stepped up this year, sponsored the show with a full kit for me and some backpacks for 4 of you lucky listeners. Thanks to Brian at Dakine for hooking that up. Jeff Clark won the Tribute Board Shop hoodie. I'll be sending those prizes out this week. This will be the 3rd season that Mike Strato from Vans Canada has been hooking me up with Vans High Standard boots. I love those boots. You can get Vans, Wired Snowboards, Dakine outerwear and accessories at Vancouver's premier board shop, the Boardroom Snowboard Shop. Go to boardroomshop.com for all your snowboarding needs. Grouse Mountain also supports the show. They're opening more terrain as the snow flies here in Vancouver. So get up there and get after it.
It was a totally fun time. Didn't get too gnarly.
I kind of look at the Mystery Air as an improved evolution of the Switchblade.
Snowboarding is ours.
And obviously I like working with Burton.
As an old school snowboarder, you get so used to being treated as a second-class citizen.
And I was like, how do you spell your last name? He said Kelly. And I was like, oh, we should get married. And he's like, no, too symmetrical.
Welcome back to the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast. My name's Eric Charlson. I'm host of the show. So I'm super stoked that the waffle sold out. 50 tickets sold. So all in all, with the raffle and the Kazukami premiere, I raised close to $2,000 for the show. Thanks to everyone who supported those events. I've already put that money to great use, getting a new laptop, a new recorder, new mics and mic stands, and there's enough left over to pay for this year's hosting of the show. So I'm stoked. I'm currently on holidays from work. I had a bit of a low tide POW morning this morning with tons more snow in the forecast while I'm off, so I'm fucking ready for it. So I'm so glad winter is back. This week's show features Lance Pitman, who rode for K2 back in the 90s, traveling the world from when he was just 16 years old. Then he quit K2 and he started his own brand called Illuminati, and now he's head coach at the Jackson Hole Snowboard Club. You're in Jackson Hole.
Yeah.
You guys have snow right now.
We have pretty good amount of snow, yeah.
Whistler's open, but nothing like the stuff that I saw. Actually saw your Instagram from yesterday. You were coaching, and I guess you met up with Travis, hey?
Yeah. It was a pretty good day. That was Sunday.
Yeah. Oh, so that's, 2 days ago. Just the snow looked epic.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. They had planned to open this chair called Thunder Chair at Jackson on Saturday, and they did open it for about 20 minutes, and then there was an inbound avalanche.
Ooh.
So they shut the chair, and then so it didn't really get ridden. And then on Sunday it was like completely sunny and nobody was there. It was just ride right onto the chair every lap, and it was still all like pretty damn fresh from the day before, which was the first day of the year that they'd opened that chair. So it was just kind of like bottomless.
Wow.
Good.
Yeah, I saw that back three. Was that a one of the kids in the program for you?
Yeah.
How stoked is that kid to do a big back three off a cat track and have like Travis Rice, Lance Pitman just like cheering in the background?
Yeah, it was pretty rad.
Yeah.
Especially because it's like that kid in particular literally like lived in a basket underneath the desk in our Illuminati Snowboards office when he was like an infant. He's the son of my business partner from the snowboard company.
Oh, rad.
So it's pretty rad to get to go like shred with him and see him like coming up. He's a total ripper.
Right on. Yeah, that was a good shot. It's fun to be this connected via Instagram to, the entire world. But at the same time, like I was saying, with no snow in Vancouver, it's also like soul crushing to see people, Japan is popping off right now, and there's good snow in Revelstoke got hammered. They opened with, I'm going to be talking Canadian here, 60 centimeters on Saturday of fresh and Bluebird. So I'm just chomping over here. I can't wait for it to snow properly. But let's start at the beginning. Where did Lance Pitman start snowboarding, and what kind of board were you riding at the beginning of, what got you hooked?
Well, let's see. I started skateboarding in Boise, Idaho when I was like probably 6 years old or something. And my dad had me skiing a little bit. Mm-hmm. And this would have been like 1984 or something. Mm-hmm. And so let's see, like fast forward a couple years, I'm like 9 years old, probably 8 years old when I first became aware of snowboarding. Mm-hmm. And there was no snowboard on the market yet that was small enough. And so I remember going to a snowboard shop or a ski shop in Boise and talking to a salesman with my dad, and they had, there was like a 145 canoe board that they had, but it was still probably like, 2 feet above my head in length. And the guy was just like, it's too big, you're not going to be able to ride it. And I was like putting up a fight. I was like, whatever, I'll be able to ride it. Yeah. And he told my dad, he's like, just wait one season, like Burton's going to be coming out with this new model they're gonna have a 135, and that might be small enough for him to ride. So the next winter, my dad got a Burton Cruise 135.
Wow!
And supposed to be this, like, my older brother and I were gonna share it. And we went up to Bogus Basin in Boise there and hopped on the rope tow at night, and my brother rode it a couple runs down the rope tow and fell and hurt his wrist, and he was like, I don't want anything to do with this thing, you can have it. So I was psyched. And that was, I rode that whole season in Boise, and then I rode not even half the next season. It was really just like the month of December, so probably just a couple of times out. But then my parents moved our whole family to Jackson.
Shout out to Bogus Basin for sure. I've been talking to the guy that's running things up there. He seems pretty cool.
Yeah, honestly, I've never been back there since I was like 10 years old. So.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, and Jackson is insane, right? Like, I came down a few years ago. I was absolutely blown away by the inbounds fall line. And then the side country there is, I've never been to a resort that has access in that way to like steeps like that. It's really, really unique and really cool.
Yeah, growing up here, it was kind of like, it's the fishbowl that you grow up in. Mm-hmm. So, I had a little bit of awareness of how awesome it was because I had come from Boise and snowboarded there, and so I knew the difference in that way. And then we'd travel around to some resorts in Utah and around the region.
Did your brother ever take it up again, or did he just ski?
He just kept skiing.
Rad.
And, he's a good skier.
Yeah.
But he kind of, he never really got into snowboarding after that. It just kind of wasn't his thing.
So what's the next sport after the Burton?
Oh, yeah, okay. So then I moved to Jackson, and I got a couple seasons in on that board, and then, totally blew up the edge and just destroyed the board. And then the Craig Kelly Micro came out.
Nice.
And that was like a 145, so it was like a perfect fit. And, Craig was definitely just like my idol.
Rad.
At that point in time. And so I was like all about it. Got my hands on one of those and rode that for a couple of years. And then, then I got to be about 13 years old, I guess. And starting to do all the contests and the, local regional contests around here. And the first sponsor, I guess you could even call it a sponsorship. This basically a guy from a local snowboard shop contacted me and was like, hey, there's this new snowboard company coming out and they're looking for some guys to test their product. And it was called Checkered Pig.
Yeah, Kevin Young was on Checkered Pig in Canada. And Tim Wendell.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I never knew that.
Oh, yeah, because you guys were on the team together at K2, right?
We were on K2 together, but I never have heard that he was also on Checkered Pig.
Yeah. Tim Wendell came up to Toronto and did a demo at this tiny little hill called Lake Ridge, just outside of Toronto. And he was riding Checkered Pig at that time, just fresh off Sims. And even when I went to Wendell's summer camp the next summer in 1990, Checkered Pig made like mountain bikes too. And everything at Wendell's that one year was like Checkered Pig demo boards and Checkered Pig bikes. And oh my God, yeah.
That's amazing. It's like a vortex of some kind, because I honestly didn't even know that Tim was like on Checkered Pig too, but it's strange to know, because Tim was a pretty pivotal character in my, coming up.
Really?
Yeah, so after the Checkered Pig thing, the way that turned out was they lent me a board and made me sign a contract that said that I would give it back at the end of the season.
Awesome.
So it didn't feel like much of a sponsorship.
Right.
And so I rode that board for a few months that season, and then Chris Pappas, who was George, that's his brother.
Yeah, he was head coach at Wendell's when I went.
Yeah, so Chris Pappas was at this local contest in Jackson, and I won my division for the half pipe, and he came up to me after the contest and was like, do you ride for these guys? I want you to ride for Aggression Snowboard.
Wow.
He's like, I'll give you 2 boards right now.
Damn.
He's like, come out to the car with me. I'll give you 2 boards right this minute.
That's amazing.
And so I jumped on Aggression boards for that whole spring, and then that summer. And so I went to Wendell's camp that summer. And I think it must have been the first season that I went to Wendell's camp. I went as a camper.
Mm-hmm.
And I was only 14 years old, but I had just gotten sponsored by Bonfire.
Whoa.
Bonfire was a pretty well established but very small, brand
Mm-hmm.
going on. And in the local snowboard shop, which I had worked for, well, I'm getting my timeline mixed up. I hadn't yet worked for them, but I was on their team, I guess, at that point.
Yeah.
And they just threw, do you remember Bonfire made the fireman jacket?
I remember that jacket well. Yeah.
Yeah. So that had just kind of come out the year before, and they had some prototypes of the next version of the fireman's coat.
Rad.
And I went to this contest at Targhee, and it was a springtime half pipe comp, and there was, I think Dale Rayberg maybe, or one of the Joyride guys had gotten some shots wearing these yellow plastic fireman
overalls.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I got my hands on a pair of these like yellow plastic fireman overalls. And then I got this fireman jacket and went and rode in this half pipe contest and ended up winning the contest. And we did a little like photo shoot, just one hits in the pipe. And I got some pretty cool photos, like wearing that fireman's jacket. And they sent them off to Bonfire, and Bonfire was stoked, and they were like, let's meet up at Mount Hood when he comes to camp. Because, the guys at the snowboard shop were kind of facilitating this whole thing. So I basically got told that when you go to snowboard camp, like, the guys from Bonfire want to meet up with you.
Rad.
And then I end up going to snowboard camp, and this one day, Tim Wendell, like, pulls me aside, and he goes, hey, so you're not going to go up with, like, the bus today. This guy, Brad, from Bonfire, is going to come pick you up, and you guys are going to go ride at, like, Mount Hood Snowboard Camp's pipe and do a photo shoot.
Whoa. Was that Brad Stewart?
Yeah, it was Brad Stewart. So Brad Stewart shows up with Justin Hostenek, and they take me up to, I think it was Mount Hood Snowboard Camp. It could have been like USSTC or something, but it was one of the other snowboard camps.
Yep.
And we basically just like had the half pipe to ourselves, and I just did a bunch of like one hits in the pipe wearing like different Bonfire clothes. And anyway, the short of it is that, like, a few months later, Bonfire runs a full-page ad of me doing a frontside air in Snowboarder magazine.
Rad.
And I was like 14 years old.
Oh, man.
So, and Brad was like, kind of like a year goes by, a season goes by. I rode the aggression boards the next season. And end of that next season, Brad basically was like, hey, we got to find you a different board sponsor. That company, they'll be lucky to last like another year. He's like, I got connections at Sims or K2. Who'd you rather ride for? And I was like, oh, I'd totally rather ride for Sims. Like, I want to ride for Sims. And I think at the time, like, Palmer was just going off, and Selaznick was on Sims, and it was like, they were like pretty rad company in my mind at the time. And, so anyway, I was like, oh, I want to be on Sims. And he's like, all right, let me see what I can do. And he kind of calls me back, and he's like, probably a couple of weeks went by or something. He calls me back. He's like, he's like, team manager for Sims is like out of the country for who knows how long. He's not getting back. It's like, it could be like, who knows how long before this guy even like returns a phone call. And he's like, and honestly, he's like, I don't know how good the future's looking for Sims either. He's like,
wow.
He's like, it would probably be a really safe, good bet to just, jump on with K2. And I was like, whatever you say, man. Like, sounds good to me. So he put me in touch with Luke Edgar from K2. And all of a sudden I'm on K2.
What was the first boards that they sent you? Those HCs or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they gave me like an HC 152 twin tip.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was HC. Was it AC or HC? I don't remember.
There were both, but yeah.
One I got was black and red.
Yeah. One of my best friends in Ontario rode that board.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought the K2's boards were awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought they were great.
Mm-hmm.
And they were pushing technology, and they had really cool like engineers that were really nice guys and were so smart.
Did you visit them in Vashon? Like, did you go to Vashon Island?
Oh yeah,
so
for sure,
sick.
man, like several times.
Cool.
Because I mean, I ended up riding for K2 for like 7 years.
Wow.
So I got on with K2 when I was 15, and everything just started happening really fast. Like, so I went to snowboard camp at Mount Hood 2 seasons in a row, and then as a camper, and then Tim offered me a job as a coach.
Rad.
So I'm 16 years old, living in the dorms with the campers because I'm not old enough to live like off the grounds in the coach's house where all the partying's going on. And and so then like that same, after I think I coached for a season at Hood, and I came back, I'm in high school, and spring break comes around, and Bonfire's like dragging me around on a little tour. I hopped in a motorhome with Matt Goodwill and Noah Selaznick, and
wow.
Like, I'm trying to remember, Aaron Vincent, who was the other guy on Sims, with kind of like Patriot of Noah.
Mm-hmm.
And we went for just, they went on this whole tour. They were like touring with like a punk rock band around the Rocky Mountain area. And I just hopped in with them for like, I went to Big Sky with them, and then I went to Sun Valley. And then like my parents like came and picked me up.
Amazing.
But they just let me like hop in with them for just like a couple of, I didn't even like stay the night with them. I don't think, I just like pretended like I was on tour with them for a hot minute. And I might've been like 15 when that happened.
How old were those guys at that point? Like 17, 18 kind of thing?
No, I'm pretty sure they were like 21. Because they were like drinking age, and it was like seemed pretty scandalous. Like the girls they were interacting with were pretty young.
Oh crap!
So yeah, and a couple other Jackson guys. This guy Dustin Varga, this guy Billy Bacon.
Dude, I love Dusty, man. He was on the Ice Age team with me when in the mid '90s. That guy's just fucking golden, dude.
Yeah, he is like total character. He's still in Jackson, and like his son's on the team now. His kid Finn is ripping, starting to come into it.
Epic.
They're actually like neighbors with Travis, so he gets the personal Travis Rice coaching like probably on a weekly basis in their homemade snowboard park.
I love that.
But so yeah, then Bonfire took me to New Zealand when I was 16 years old, and I met up with like a handful of guys down there. It was like J2 and Jim Moran, Todd Franzen,
Rad,
Joel Mahaffey.
Amazing.
And
I think I remember pictures from that trip. Joel was on those KX boards that ride time.
Yeah, we didn't actually snowboard. I didn't get to snowboard with Joel, really. We were just like bumping into each other in the bars and stuff in Queenstown. And we were both like, we were kind of like the youngest dudes around.
Yeah.
We were both like kind of like the same age.
Were the older guys kind of corrupting the young guys? Was there like, beers being snuck to you guys and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, it was pretty intense. Like, I think it's probably the second. So I went to New Zealand the first year, and then we went back again the second year. And it was probably the second year that I went that we ran into like Sean Kearns and Sean Johnson, and they were like making, whiskey 2 or 3 or something, and they just got us really drunk, to say the least. It was definitely like pretty loose.
Yeah. Is the drinking age younger in New Zealand?
Yeah, I mean, I remember it kind of being like the rumor was there was no drinking age, but then when we got there, it was sort of like, well, it's actually like 18, and then it would be like, well, actually it's 16. We didn't even know.
Wow.
We didn't know what was going on. We were just getting toted around and jumping off stuff.
Right.
And then, the second year that I went there was actually the year that Jason Ford and J2 and all those guys came on the trip, because they were just, at the very beginnings of the Solomon bonfire acquisition.
Right. Okay.
And Ford was, but those guys, we got to the airport, and the way I remember it was like all four of these guys. It was like Jim Moran and J2 and Jason Ford, and I can't remember, just like one other guy, but they all rent their own rental car. And I was like, what's going on? Like, I don't get it. And then I watched over the next like 7 days, like the chaos of like rally car madness that ensued with the rental cars. And I understood why they all had their own cars, because there would only be one car drivable by the end of the trip.
Oh my God.
It was pretty amazing to see them just being like loose pro snowboard dudes. So then I got out of high school, and Bonfire and K2 were starting to become direct competitors, because Bonfire was teaming up with Solomon, and K2 was introducing an outerwear line, and it kind of came to a head. And I had a long sit down with, well, I shouldn't say a long sit down. I had a long phone call with Brad Stewart,
mm-hmm.
where I basically expressed to him, like, yeah, it seems like it's kind of coming to a head here, and I'm getting a lot of pressure to ride K2 clothing, and I was real candid with him, and I just was like, look, I'd rather ride for Bonfire, and if I can get on Solomon. I just felt really loyal to Brad, because he had basically like opened the door for me.
Right.
And he just, he was very honest with me, and he was like, it's not looking good for the American riders on Bonfire. Like, we're teaming up with this big French conglomerate, and they're going to be putting a lot of weight behind the European riders.
Right.
He's like, we've got a couple of guys like, Ford in particular, who's going to have like a signature model on Solomon when we get started. He's like, but I'd be surprised if it lasts more than a couple of years for any of the American guys.
Right.
He's like, I don't know. And I was like really bummed to hear that. And so I was kind of like, well, if I took a pay cut, could I, and he's like, man, I don't think it's a good call. And he's like, I can't match what K2's given you. And honestly, I just don't think it would be a good move for you. So I just kind of trusted his instincts, and I just, parted ways with Bonfire at that point. And at that point I was basically like head to toe K2.
Did you do the clicker stuff?
Well, this was like the biggest source of contention between me and K2. I wouldn't at the beginning.
Right.
And, because in the beginning I rode for 32 when they were a first, just an upstart company. I think I rode for 32. I was getting free boots from 32, and I had a relationship going with Eddie Lee. I don't think I was like listed on their team list. I can't remember honestly, but I had like the beginnings of a sponsorship going with 32, and And same thing with Dragon, you know, and I quit riding Dragon to ride for Devin's company.
Oh, yeah, right.
Iris Highway. And anyway, I guess what I'm getting at is that I kind of let some sponsorships go that I couldn't see back then, like, you know, how amazingly lucky I was to be involved with these companies. Like, had I stuck with them, it probably would have been pretty amazing thing. But I just, you know, I kind of just was going where all the real support was, and the real support was coming from K2. And so I was riding 32 boots, and I stuck that out as long as I could. And K2 started making boots, and then they were making the clicker, and I was like, well, I'll ride your regular boots, but I don't want to ride the clickers.
Right.
And then, you know, after a season or maybe 2 seasons of that, they were kind of like, well, we're not giving you a raise unless you like start promoting the clicker, essentially, something like that.
Right.
And I agreed that I would do it for photo shoots. So I started, like, you know, when we'd go on these team trips, I would ride clickers at the photo shoots, and honestly, I started hurting myself. I don't know that it was because of the clickers or anything, but that's kind of the way I interpreted it at the time. I just felt like I was riding gear that I wasn't used to and was in development stage. And you know, I don't know. I thought those things were dangerous. They felt like they had a steel rod running through the bottom of my foot. And
right.
I was getting injuries. And so that kind of became pretty contentious with me and the K2 guys.
Yeah, because there goes your authenticity, right? When you're like riding something kind of against your will because your sponsor's saying like, well, this is what we're promoting now. Yeah, that's such a tough call to make, because how do you tell them, like, look, man, I'm riding at a level that's above this gear.
Right, and I was like 17, 18 years old. You know, I didn't really have the communication skills to really express that.
Yeah, did you know it at the time though? Like, was it obvious to you? Like, man, this setup is fucking me up.
Well, so my first year out of high school, I got an apartment pretty close to the ski hill in Jackson with J.P. Martin.
Nice.
And he was like coming off K2 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been up in Alaska like the season before maybe or something, where he was riding like prototype clicker gear that they sent him.
Mm-hmm.
And he had some experience where like one of the clicker bindings, just his foot just came out like mid-run or something, like on an Alaskan like face. And you know, one of the teeth or something that held the clicker in place, you know, just busted off. And he said that he talked to the K2 guys about it, and they're like, oh yeah, that's been happening.
Oh God. And
he was just livid. He was so mad. And he was just like, so I was getting all this from him when we, like, cause it had just happened like the season before, I think, you know. And so when I was living with him, he was telling me these stories about how they were sending him to Alaska and having him ride gear that was like untested and that they knew was like breaking. And I don't know if that's all true or what, you know. I don't mean to paint K2 in this like real bad light. I just,
right,
you know, this
right.
was just what was happening for me at the time. And they, so, you know, I didn't have a lot of faith in them.
Right.
And, you know, it seemed kind of interesting and cool. And like, I wasn't like totally closed off to it all. I kind of thought they looked kind of dorky.
Right.
And they just weren't as cool as I was hoping to be, associated with. And I thought that they felt funny.
Okay. Yeah. There was a limited number of boots. I remember that too, because I worked at a shop at that point. And there were all these step-in companies coming out, but each of them only had like a cheaper boot and a more expensive boot. So they had like a mid-range boot and an expensive stiff boot. And if you're on 32 before that and you're getting to choose from, 8 different models and you can pick like 10 different colorways, you're going, all of a sudden you've got to choose from like 4 SKUs.
Well, and I mean, honestly, like at that point in my life, I was just writing whatever anybody gave me. I didn't have the awareness about like really like what differentiated the gear.
Right.
To know, like, is this a mid-range boot or a low-end boot or a high-end boot? I just got boots in the mail, and if they fit, I just wore them.
Wow.
And I usually only got like, one pair of boots or something. It's not like I had 10 pairs to change out and try from. So I just, but I definitely like the feel of the binding and the boots.
Mm-hmm.
I like having that, the heel, the ankle strap, like in between, to support my ankle in the forward bend. And the K2, the clicker boot didn't have that.
Right.
And then it had this steel rod running through the base of the boot.
Yeah.
That just made it felt like your feet were just like clamped down and just getting bent around on this like metal, it just felt like it was wrenching my ankles in ways that didn't feel good.
Yeah.
I felt like if I went over the bars at high speed in those things that I could just like wreck my ankles or something.
Right. So do you quit K2 at that point? Do you go back to soft boots?
Well, I mean, I just continued to ride soft boots, and then I rode clickers like at photo shoots and like randomly here and there to like test them out. I mean, I definitely had like, if you look at my video parts in the different little videos that I had shots in, you'd see me like 9 out of 10 shots I'd be riding soft boots and regular bindings, but then there'd be like one shot of me like wearing clickers.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was trying them out and like testing the gear and we were trying to like shoot film and photos basically like every time we snowboarded.
Yeah.
So, inevitably there would be these shots and stuff that ended up, on the clickers.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like I stuck to my guns pretty strongly about not wanting to go the clicker route.
Mm-hmm.
And then things just kind of, it's kind of hard to like, I could tell the story, like how I experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
And I could also tell the story of like looking back on it as an adult,
Right.
So, the way I like to kind of tell the story is more so through the lens of like what I learned once I got like into my 30s, when I really started like working on myself as a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of working through my issues.
Yeah, cool.
Because I learned some really interesting, I saw some patterns and some interesting correlations that really seemed meaningful to me. So, when I was like 21-ish, something like that, there was one season, I started having really bad asthma problems.
Okay.
And I had been like a severe chronic asthmatic basically my whole life. I mean, I was diagnosed at age 2 and I was like the asthma kid.
Mm-hmm.
And, always had an inhaler in my pocket. was always sucking on that thing. And when I was around like 21, I started, you know, it was probably like the springtime, early summer when all the pollens and stuff are coming out. But I just started having really, really bad asthma, and I was going to the doctor and trying to figure it out. And I told K2 I wasn't going to be able to go to Mount Hood for the summer because I needed to like get healthy.
Right.
And they didn't like that. It was the first year that I hadn't been like coaching for the entire summer at Hood since I was like 16.
Mm-hmm.
And, but anyway, I was just really like having some big asthma issues. And, you know, in hindsight, it seems like that kind of was like a catalyst for the departure. Cause it seemed like after I took that summer off, then I started hearing things from K2 like, oh, it seems like you're not committed. It seems like you're not, you know, I mean, I really only heard that like one time. I got in a big fight with my team manager. We almost like went to blows, and some mean things got said back and forth between the two of us. And so there was tension in the relationship there, and it was like pretty loaded. And then the way I remember it, and, you know, memory's a funny thing, you know, like the way I remember it is that K2 had been telling me for a year, you're going to have a pro model next year. You're going to have a pro model next year. And Chris Ingelsman was supposed to be getting a pro model too. And him and I were working with these engineers on developing these boards and this, that, and the other thing. And, you know, the way I perceive it is that Terrier had the Terrier Hawkinson Pro model, and then it turned into the Balance.
Right.
And Burton stopped doing signature model boards completely. And K2 just immediately followed suit. And so after a year of like, kind of like working towards this sort of ultimate goal as a like young aspiring pro snowboarder to have a signature model, it kind of got just like ripped out from under me. And same for Chris. And we were pretty upset about it. And we were talking, and we came up with this whole idea to do a limited series of boards that we were going to, you know, that for K2 that would be called like the team edition. And the idea was that they would sell them direct online, and with all the extra margin that they're making from selling direct, they would commission the team.
Rad.
And give some back to the team. And we went and pitched this idea. And at the time, like e-commerce was this brand new thing. And this was probably like 1999.
Wow.
And we went up to Washington and pitched them on this idea, at the annual like team conference thing that we would do every year. We pitched them this idea of the team model, and essentially the way I remember it was that they were like, we love the idea of the team model. There's no way in hell that we can sell direct online because our retailers will just freak out.
Right.
So we're going to do the team model, and we're going to just sell it through specialty retail at just the most core shops that carry our product.
Yep.
And we were like, okay, great. That's awesome. So how much commission does the team get off of this? And they were like, oh, no, we're not commissioning the team.
Wow.
And for me, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was just like, are you kidding me? Like, first you like take away the signature model that I've been riding or that I've been working on for like what felt like my whole life. And now you're taking this idea that we brought to you and you're just taking it and cutting out the most important part of it. So they did do that. They made the Team Series boards and put them in specialty retail and all this stuff. But by the time that thing came out, I was gone.
Yeah. I worked for them at that point. I was at K2 Canada. Yeah, the industry was just falling apart. And also K2 was moving their production from Vashon to China.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, I'm not down with these guys now. Plus, you guys leaving impacted the integrity of the, because I was always the core guy. I'm working at these shops going, maybe there were too many pro models at one point, but I didn't ever want. Yeah, I would have really supported, a team model that obviously the team needs to get some commission from that. They were just like, corporations were just kind of pushing out the core of the sport and saying like, oh, I don't know that we need to support that anymore. We're just going to make like big lines of boards and focus on different price points. So that sucks for you guys big time.
Yeah, I mean, it did and it didn't. Like it had me really angry. Mm-hmm. And I basically used that anger as like fuel to just make a move. And, so then I quit and started Illuminati Snowboards.
Rad.
And basically like just plowed every penny that I'd ever made at K2 plus borrowed money and stuff into this, crazy idea of like selling snowboards on the internet. I basically took the plan that we pitched to K2 and turned it into the business plan for Illuminati Snowboards, which was really simple. It was just like build a website, get snowboards made, and sell them direct online.
Yeah, who's involved with Illuminati? Was it Chris? You and Chris in the beginning?
Well, I want to be a little bit careful how I tell this story because there's my understanding of what agreements we had.
Right.
And it may have just been me being hopeful. But, in my mind,
yep,
Chris and I had an agreement that we were both leaving K2.
Oh.
And I thought that Chris had talked to Travis because Chris and Travis Parker were much closer than Travis and I were. And I was under the impression that Chris had talked to Travis and that all three of us were leaving K2. And we were starting Illuminati Snowboards. And it was going to be this, big thing, like, kind of like the top guys from K2 leave and start their own company kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, from my experience, it was like we all stood on the edge of the bridge and said, 1, 2, 3, go. And then I popped up out of the water and those guys were still up on the bridge.
Oh, no.
Which was just confusing for me. I didn't, I was like, what? I don't even understand how you could do that. But I've reflected on that quite a bit, and it's not like we ever signed contracts together. We had a lot of conversations, and it was like we were all really inspired to do it, but it's very likely that in their mind, it was still just an idea. Whereas in my mind, it was like what I was doing.
Right.
But either way, I left and, started Illuminati Snowboards, but it kind of changed very quickly from like having all the money Chris was going to bring in and all the clout that Chris was going to bring to just me and my friends here in Jackson, and I mean, really, when I even first started the whole thing, like Willie McMillan was still riding for like Type A or something, and he wasn't even really on the program yet. And so basically found this guy in Jackson who I'd met at the golf course named Robert Emery. And I just was like, I need somebody who can kind of hold down the fort and be in the office. And you want to go on this ride with me? And he was like, sure, I'd love to. And I was like, well, we're going to capitalize the company. If you want ownership in the money or in the company, you got to have skin in the game. Right. And he basically, put up enough cash to get like 10% of the company. And then another friend of mine put up another bit of cash to get like 10% of the company. And I had like 80%
right.
of the capitalization. And then we just, but it was like half of what I thought we were going to start with, because Chris, I thought, was going to come in with like the same amount of money that I was coming in with.
Right.
Chris and I never even really discussed it. And within like 1 year, he had quit K2 and gone and started like Elevation Snowboards.
Yeah, I remember them.
And so in like piecing it all together in hindsight, I'm like, well, Chris, I think, had 1 more year left on his contract, whereas
sure.
my contract was done.
Right.
And so it made sense for me to leave. It didn't really make sense for him to leave, like, because he's got another year on his contract and there's money coming in. And so I don't, I feel fine about like how it all went down. And like,
yeah, but obviously at the time you felt a little bit burned or confused or whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that I felt burned. I kind of felt like, what a wuss, like I can't believe he didn't go for it with me. What he's a wuss.
Right.
But now I'm kind of like, or he's smart.
Yeah, running a company is insane, right?
Yeah, and we just had no clue. I mean, I had no clue what I was really doing. I just, and it was awesome because it was like this whole experiment in allowing the world to show up and support you in whatever you're stepping into.
Right.
Which for me, like, that's what Illuminati represents. I didn't even know about Illuminati as like this dark conspiracy in the world.
Yeah, how did you pick the name? You just liked the name.
Well, I had this snowboard coach named Adam Bebout,
mm-hmm.
who became a good friend of mine. When he was my coach, he was only like a couple of years older than me, and he rode for K2 and on a regional level, and he introduced me to the concept. And he went on to be like a sales manager kind of guy, promotions guy for Red Bull, and now he works for like Fox Motorsports, I think.
Wow.
But he was just a really pivotal guy in my life when I was younger, and he introduced me to the whole idea and to this book, the Illuminatus Trilogy, which was written by Robert Anton Wilson and this other guy, Robert Shea, in like the 60s. And it really pop culturized the whole Illuminati concept.
Right.
But it's not really like what you would find on YouTube today or something. It's, the information that I was getting when I started the company was not about this like kind of dark, satanic, like, I don't know, like conspiracy to rule the world.
Yeah, see, I don't know a lot about it, but is the Illuminati conspiracy the one with the lizard people that eat babies? Am I way off on that?
I mean, I guess. I think that's how, like, David Icke would portray it.
I remember a dude telling me about it in the 90s. Like, it was a Mexican guy who bought my car, and he was telling me about Queen Elizabeth as a lizard, and I was like, holy shit, I almost don't want to sell this guy my car, but I really need that, like, $400. I remember just thinking, like, holy shit, that is out there.
Yeah, I mean, the way I would look at the lizard concept is, like, more like from an evolutionary perspective, like that we all have this lizard brain,
sure,
part of ourselves, and that when we're, like, really wrapped up in the ego and fight or flight kind of way of being, that we're, and we, like, when we want to control everything like the ego does, that we're, like, basically operating from the lizard brain.
Okay, yeah,
that's the way I would look at that whole thing.
That makes more sense than Queen Elizabeth eating babies to maintain a human face over her lizard face. Right?
Right. I mean, the way I look at it is, like, the people in the world that are completely consumed by the need to dominate and control others are operating, like, in a stuck in the lizard brain kind of way.
I could sign on to that.
That's the way I kind of look at it. And but anyway, I read this book, The Illuminati's Trilogy, and it was all about, like, this, psychedelics and fantasy and kind of synchronicities and going on this, like, choose your own adventure in life.
Rad.
And Illuminati to me meant, like, light and truth.
Cool.
And it had like this very, I don't know, palpable, like, spiritual meaning for me. It was inspiring to me. It brought out, like, poetry and stuff. I mean, one of the early ads that we ran was, like, I wrote this poem and, like, published it,
Right.
overlaid over this, like, shot of, like, snowboarding. And, it was just very, like, spiritual thing for me. And it was also about, like, magic and magical thinking and this idea that you can set your mind to something and that, like, the world will sort of reorganize itself to support that, or, and so, we set out to start making snowboards. I mean, here I'm so confident in as a young person that I go and spend, like, $40,000 on ads in Snowboarder magazine for a new company called Illuminati Snowboards, and I don't even have a place to get snowboards made.
Man.
And I'm just like, I don't even know. I'm just going to figure it out. And then all of a sudden, some guy just, like, shows up who's like, oh, hey, yeah, like, I work at this factory in Portland, and we make snowboards, and we make the boards for M3. This was, like, the Yoshida factory.
Yeah.
That existed then. And this guy, Eric Luthart, was just like, he just showed up out of nowhere. I don't even know. I think he just contacted us. And all of a sudden we're like, cool, we got boards. Like, we got that figured out.
Amazing.
For that season. For that season. And then, things got so interesting. Like, I think probably, like, our second year, it was actually when Eric Luthart showed up. I'm pretty sure that was our second year in business. Our first year, we made some boards in California. And, I don't even remember what name the factory was. they were just pretty standard, like twin tip sandwich construction boards, and they were good enough, you know. But then when we got with the M3 boards, they were a step up, and we were pretty psyched on the product. But then they went out of business.
Right.
And so then it's like we're going into year 3, and we need to find a manufacturer again. And the same kind of thing happened, where all of a sudden this guy reaches out to me, and he's like, hey, I have this company in California. We make boards. You know, I want to know if you'd like to make boards here. I was like, well, do you have any like directional free ride shapes? And, you know, I was like, you know, we want like boards that are going to ride like mountains and powder, like well, like, and he's like, yeah, he's like, actually, you're going to love this. And he tells me this story about how Matt Cass had been riding for K2. And he left K2 and went and joined like Joyride when Joyride was having a revival.
Right.
And they make this Matt Cass signature model. And they basically just traced the K2 A-Star.
Oh, yeah.
Which the K2 A-Star is the board that my signature model turned into.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I rode these boards for a year thinking that it was, like, going to be, like, my board.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I mean, I think the way it actually was, it was like, they were making a line of boards called the A-Star, and my board was going to be based off of the A-Star line.
Right.
I think that would be a more accurate way to portray it. So anyway, he's like, you're gonna, you know, so he tells me, like, we've got this board. It's essentially like the same board that you were riding for years. And I was like, only they were now making it with this kind of cool construction where it was half sandwich and half cap, you know. And so we started making those boards, called it the Hybrid Conspiracy. Well, we first called it the Hybricon.
Nice.
And then we got sued by a company.
What?
Because they made like hybrid transistors of some kind, and they were called Hybricon Corporation. Whoa. But if you search the word Hybricon in Google, you would get our product.
Right.
And they sent us this cease and desist, and I was like trying to play lawyer with them, and I was like, well, we're not even in the same category. You know, you guys make like semiconductor parts or whatever, and I'm making snowboards. Like, you can't say that we're creating confusion in the marketplace for you.
Right.
And so then they send me another cease and desist, only this time they're saying that we're tarnishing their brand.
Oh, God.
Because if you search Hybricon, Illuminati Snowboards product comes up. And then if you search Illuminati, you get a bunch of like dark conspiracy information. So we're associating their brand with the Illuminati conspiracy and therefore tarnishing their brand.
That's a stretch.
Yeah, but it was a big enough thing that I was like, you know what? I don't want to deal with this. Fine, we're just going to call it the Hybrid Conspiracy.
Right, right.
So we just, the name of the board for the following, you know, I just told them, I was like, look, we still got like, you know, 100 boards in stock that are called the Hybricon. Let us clear them out. Next season, we'll change the name of the board. And they were like, okay.
Rad.
So we got through that. And I don't know. I could keep talking about Illuminati snowboards.
I love this, dude. I just like, because I'm fascinated by your story, dude. Let's dive into the Devin thing a little bit. Where did you meet Devin and get on the Iris team? Because the Iris team was really localized. Not like, you know, the majority of the team was like Whistler, Vancouver. And I remember you being on the team and being like, wow, that's a rad connection.
Yeah, so I met Devin when I was probably like 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a guy named Jason Moriarty,
Yep.
who made snowboard movies for a while, and he went on to make Sled Necks,
Yep.
and he still does that,
Rad.
as far as I know.
Yeah.
But so Jason was like the first guy that ever really was like, I want you in our snowboard movie. Like, will you come and film with me and make a part? And and his kind of two worlds was like Jackson Hole and Canada.
Right.
And he was friends with Devin, and his movies had Devin and some other guys like featured in them. And so he brought Devin to Jackson along with probably Kale or probably Kevin.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I was so young when they first came to Jackson, but we did a little bit of filming together there, and then we went to Canada, and then they started, when they started Iris, Devin asked me to be on the team, and I was like honored, and I was stoked, and it wasn't even like a question for me. I was like, hell yeah, I'm going to be on this team. Mahaffey was on the team. We were like kind of, I feel like the two American dudes that were on the team, and we were both really young, and we like to party. So we fit in, and then it's kind of unfortunate. I feel like it was just like this kind of miscommunication, or combined with like probably a bad decision that I made. But the way that it kind of ended was, I was told that, they were doing a photo shoot in Canada, and I was told that I would have, that they were going to fly me up there. And, I just was told that they were going to fly me up there and on this certain date. So I was kind of in communication with the team manager about getting a plane ticket and everything. And maybe I was operating under the assumption that they were going to buy me my plane ticket out of Jackson Hole. But I think what happened was that they called me at like 10 o'clock at night and were like, hey, so it's way too expensive out of Jackson to get you a plane ticket. And we got you out of a plane ticket out of Salt Lake tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.
Oh my God.
And it's a 5-hour drive. And it was like storming and snowing, and I was really sick. I had a pretty bad cold, and I just didn't feel like I could do it.
Right.
I was like, to do this, I'm going to have to like pack right now and start driving.
Right.
And I'm going to have to drive all through the night in a snowstorm, and I'm sick, and I didn't like make that decision instantly. Basically, I got the message like, because this is before like instant communication. It's like, it's like you're operating through voicemail and whatnot. And so I got the message that I had this plane ticket waiting for me. And I just, I tried to like rally myself, and I just couldn't do it. And I just didn't go. And I got this message like the next afternoon that was like, dude, where the fuck are you? Like, the whole team is here. You're not here. You no-showed on us. We just had a team vote. You're off the team.
Oh, shit. Right.
And I was just like, what? Like, fuck this. Like, we got to talk. Like, there's a reason why, like I didn't come, but it was like, they were just like, sorry, man, showed on a team photo shoot, like you're off.
Damn.
And so that was a tough pill for me to swallow, for sure. I always felt like it was a little bit of a tough sentence for the decision that I made, because it felt justified, but to me.
Right, right. Are you guys are still friends, obviously. Devin's a good guy. You're a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, we don't like get on the phone and chat or anything, you know. But
if he's in Jackson and you see him there, he sees you, or you're up here.
I've bumped into him like a couple of times, you know, and we shoot the shit. And every now and then he likes my photos on Instagram and stuff.
Rad. Yeah.
You know,
he's such a superstar.
No, I have nothing. I have huge respect for Devin and everything that, you know, he brought to snowboarding.
Yeah. Powerhouse. So let's, if you don't mind, let's talk some psychedelics, dude. I've had, it's funny, you mentioned Kearns and Johnson in New Zealand, and that was like at the peak of their partying time. Kearns actually was in a car accident a couple of years back, I think, and he was debilitated, you know, and he got to the point where he was quite frustrated with the medical profession and doctors' care, and just like, he was like, are you fucking serious? You guys can't fix like a chronic sore back or whatever. And he dove headfirst into psychedelic studies. Actually, he's trained in psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, I believe. But yeah, like I tried DMT with him in the spring, and I was just like, holy shit, this is incredible, man. Like an acid trip times 100 in a 5-minute journey. Like, I'm in, dude. Like, I'm fully in. And I've been watching psychedelics quite closely for maybe 25 years. And they really have, public opinion has shifted to like, oh, wait a minute, maybe the 60s and all this, you know, experimenting they were doing that got shut down. We could have gone a whole other direction, you know, with like open-mindedness and actual treatment that cures things like post-traumatic stress, which I think a lot of snowboard pros from the 90s and 2000s have some form or other of post-traumatic stress, dude. There was trauma happening with either the stuff you're talking about with like teams, or like even just being at a spot where somebody gets badly hurt or where you get badly hurt. I mean, you've told a bunch of stories in this so far of like, you know, like you're feeling sick with allergies and asthma that you've dealt with your whole life, and your team manager goes, well, we don't feel like you're supporting the brand properly. Like, I was like shouting in my head, like, that's against the fucking law, man. If I had a job, which I do with Canada Post, and I said I can't come in today because I'm crippled with fucking asthma, and they said, oh, well, we're going to just fire you then, or we're going to demote you, they wouldn't be able to get away with that. That's against the friggin' law. Meanwhile, snowboarding, you know, pros were expendable. Sorry, I just went on a crazy long rant there that has a lot of stuff in it. But
no, it's very, you know, it's very, you know, on point and appropriate for like where I'm at with my life now and what I do when I'm not coaching the FNRad program snowboard team.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And I mean, if you ever heard of the psychoanalyst Stanislav Grof, have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, but I'm not like educated in, like, I've just heard the
name. So Stanislav Grof is a Czechoslovakian psychotherapist who is now like, God, he's like 87 years old or something. But he, in like the 70s, he wrote a book called The Holotropic Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought forth a theory about the birth process.
Mm-hmm.
And he established these things called the 4 perinatal birth matrices. And essentially what I'm getting at is that we as human beings are all traumatized because being born is traumatic.
Right.
And I could go into Grof's theories, you know, in depth, but in my opinion, he's like the smartest living man in this context.
Right.
And he, in the 60s, he led the U.S. government's LSD psychotherapy research. And then when it became illegal, he switched from working with psychedelics to, he developed basically a shamanic breathing practice that uses trance-inducing music and groups of people breathing rapidly to enter into a heightened or altered state of consciousness. And then he studied for 30 years the effects of altered states of consciousness on, and how it heals and how it opens up the body to its own healing potential. And I mean, it goes on and on. He's, did, in 2008, a guy named Richard Tarnas published a book called Cosmos and Psyche that is like a groundbreaking thing. This guy, Richard Tarnas, is a really, really, really well-respected teacher and author who wrote a book called The Passion of the Western Mind that is mandatory reading in, I think, hundreds of universities. And after a 30-year career, he put out this book that's all about astrology. And
Wow.
He worked with Dan Groff. He worked with Groff studying transits and relating them to the archetypal imagery and symbols and experiences that people have in deep altered states of consciousness. And it's fascinating work. But the way this relates to me and my story, I guess, is that a couple of things. First off, like, I definitely dabbled with psychedelics, like, in high school.
Okay.
And then when I was probably in right around the time when I was starting Illuminati Snowboards, coming off K2, like that age, I was reading books by Robert Anton Wilson. And because, he wrote a lot about Illuminati as a concept and used that word a lot in his writings. And his version of that word is quite unique and the one that I subscribe to the most. I mean, he's kind of like the foremost respected author on the subject. And yet, if you on record, when he's asked, does he believe there's an Illuminati conspiracy? He basically says, well, if by a conspiracy, do you mean that there's 5 of your best friends conspiring to make your life great? Then yeah, I think there's a conspiracy.
Whoa. That's,
but he doesn't buy into this whole like lizard people dominating hierarchy,
right,
power in the world type of thing.
Right. What is he talking about? 5 of your best friends conspiring to make your life great.
I think just that, like, the world supports you if you let it.
I think it does. I think you're right, bro.
I think that's the way I interpret that. So
okay. What's his name again? I'm just writing this down because I want to read this book.
Robert Anton Wilson. He wrote a bunch of stuff. It's he was fascinated. He's dead now, but there's a series called Cosmic Trigger that's pretty awesome, and there's another one called the Historical Illuminatus Chronicles that I found really, really entertaining and relatable. And he just he was fascinated by psychedelic. He was fascinated by the power of the mind. He was fascinated by science. He said in one of his writings, like, just like how our parents' generation had to free themselves of the dogmas of religion.
Yep.
The future generations will have to free themselves of the dogmas of science in a similar way. And I thought that was pretty poignant. And he's very like he's really into like the Schrodinger's cat experiment and the idea that like when you observe, electrons, they change from particles to waves, and stuff like that. But he's very much like, he would talk about like, he's like, do an experiment. He's like, before you leave the house today, he's like, imagine yourself like finding a quarter on the street.
Right.
He's like, and then like check in with yourself at the end of the day. And he's just very much like into this like idea that you can, have an effect on like what shows up in your life. And so I got really, really, really fascinated by all of this and was kind of like studying esoteric stuff and magic and ritual magic and stuff like that. And like, it goes back a little bit further. Like actually when I was 17, I dislocated my patella.
Yeah. Ouch.
And was like stuck, my kneecap was out and I was taken to the clinic at the bottom of the ski hill and I was just freaking out. I thought that I had broke my femur because it hurt so bad up in the like thigh area of my leg. I didn't know what was going on, but I was lying in the gurney and I had just gotten a book a few months before that was like a book that was kind of this like Jewish mysticism, ritual magic book. Basically like I was trying to like relate to this girl that I was in love with and went to this bookstore and was in the occult aisle. I knew she was into like witchy stuff. And so I was looking around at these books and this guy just like looks over at me and he goes, if you're interested, this is the book. And he pulls out a book from the like rack and like hands it to me. And then he turns around and walks away. Doesn't say another word to me. So I bought that book and I think it was called like Higher Magic. And it was like this kind of like Kabbalah mystical practices. And the first thing in this book was this meditation, this ball of light meditation. And they had you sitting in a bed, like in a hat, kind of at a 45-degree angle, like stacked with pillows supporting you and your feet straight out in front of you in like a pike position. And you imagine a ball of light, like moving from your feet all up around your body and everything. And I'd been doing that a little bit just as I was reading the book. And then when I got hurt and I'm in the clinic, I realized that I was sitting in the exact position that book instructed a person to sit into.
Right.
And I was freaking out. I was in so much pain and I just wanted to calm down. I wasn't trying to heal myself consciously. I just was trying to like deal. And I started doing this meditation and I was really in a heightened state already because I was going through shock and trauma. And I could really see it. I could see this ball of light and I'm moving this light up my feet and my shins and my knees, and I got it to where it was like my whole lower body was like surrounded by this glowing kind of light inside my mind, and my kneecap went back into place.
Whoa.
And it had been out for probably 20 minutes and they had told me like, we can't deal with this injury. You need to go to the hospital, like just hold tight, like the ambulance is on its way. And so that's what I was doing while I was waiting for the ambulance. And when my kneecap went back into place, the ice bag that was on my leg like flew off onto the ground. And then I experienced like this profound relief.
Yeah.
Like it was like, oh my God, like everything is okay now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that happened, and that was like, I would say that was like my first really powerful like spiritual healing experience.
I've had something sort of similar, but I didn't because I haven't read that book and I wasn't doing that technique. I had dislocated my shoulder and it was out, and I was lying on the snow in front of a bunch of people too. I jumped in front of like a contest that was going on, and I just like poached this feature, and it had gone from corn snow slush in the afternoon to like bulletproof ice. And so I just like landed in a rut, dislocated my shoulder, and I'm lying there and I'm yelling, but I can't hear my own voice. Like it feels like I'm underwater, you know, like my consciousness was like somewhere else in my body. It was underwater, it felt like. And I'm yelling like, get a sled, get ski patrol. I've dislocated my shoulder, and it hurt so bad, and I was so afraid of the fear. So fearful of the pain that I was freaking. And then I don't know how it happened, but I just relaxed for a second, and I relaxed my shoulder back into place. Like it went clunk, and it went back into place. And then my ears were normal again. I wasn't underwater anymore. And I was like, oh my God. And I stood up and I started to ride away, and the guy from the contest was on a mic. And he's like, do you need ski patrol or not? And I was like, no, cancel the ski patrol call. And I just held my arm the rest of the way down and then went home. But I can completely relate to being trapped in that zone of fear of the pain, right? Like it's so real. It takes over your entire body. And there was that voice in my head that was just like, you need to relax your shoulder back in. And as soon as it was like one breath, I just went, and I surrendered to the fact that I needed to do what I needed to do. And it happened, went back in, and I was like, that was insane. Like I could have stayed in that pain forever, like it's, gotten sledded down and just been tensed up the whole time. And my tension was holding my shoulder out of place. It was insane. And it's like,
right.
Yeah, your body is strong, dude. Like your muscles in that shoulder are like, it's really, really strong. And the instinct to relax just came to me from somewhere. And yeah, so I've had.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was dope. I mean, I had to take a break from snowboarding for a while because my shoulder swelled up, but yeah, there is some life force in us that can give you information about your own body, but a lot of times we don't listen to. We're just not in tune to listen to that. We go to a doctor and ask for a pill or an X-ray or medical intervention when a lot of times they can't find it using, we all know people that were misdiagnosed with whatever, and but it's not immediately available to everybody, that source of like self-healing.
Well, right. That's a very complicated subject.
Yeah.
It's, what do you do when your kid is suffering?
Right.
And he's got a rash that's like all over him, and he's itching and it's bleeding, and it's like, do you just tell him to breathe? and that might be the thing that actually would be.
Oh, did I lose you there somehow? As crazy, amazingly fascinating as this is, we probably should wrap it up. You're still doing Illuminati right now?
Sorry, my car's making a bunch of noises. I started my car real quick to like warm up a little bit. It's a little chilly.
That's funny. We're both in our cars, dude. I've luckily parked somewhere where the sun peeked over the horizon, so my car's warming up now.
Well, there is a fascinating story to be told around the psychedelic topic. It's been a very big part of my life, and especially in like getting to the place where I essentially chose to like go on a healing journey instead of run a snowboard company. because that's ultimately like what drove that, was getting into a very deep process with ayahuasca.
Rad.
And I could talk for a long time about that.
What was the realization?
Well, I was suffering. So again, like, you know, in my lay, when I was about 27, I got into another bad way with asthma, and I was really suffering. And a woman friend of mine introduced me to yoga, and that brought me to a yoga retreat in Hawaii. And at that retreat, I was introduced to ayahuasca, and I hadn't done any psychedelics for years because I had read this book by Robert Anton Wilson, which was what I was going to start talking about before we got a little bit sidetracked. That was basically talking about the importance of, you know, setting and intentions and working with a facilitator and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, this is not how I do psychedelics, and this seems like the right way. So I'm not going to do psychedelics anymore until it starts, you know, until I can find people that want to do it like this.
Right.
And so I hadn't done any psychedelics for probably 5 years. And I ended up at this yoga retreat, and I just got my head blown off with the ayahuasca, and it was the most profound, like, ecstatic healing experience that I had ever could have imagined. And it was all about asthma, and it was all about fear of dying, and it was just the tip of the iceberg. And, you know, it took about 1.5 years. I drank, I don't know, I drank 7 different times over the course of like 1.5 years, and it was all like a whole process. And essentially where I got to with it was that I could see that I was dealing with a psychological, like, complex that was like mixed in with my asthma story. And
Right.
the way that looks is something like, as a little kid, I heard a lot of like, oh, you shouldn't do that because of your asthma. It was like I had this, you know, like I was a cripple or something.
Right.
And like my body wasn't normal, and so I had a big story around it. I had a big story, and I had this idea in my head, like an unconscious drive that I needed to prove myself physically. Prove that I was physically capable, and also that I was not afraid of dying.
Wow.
And the dying thing was interesting because it was like, it came very clearly in one of these ayahuasca sessions where it said, like, I shouldn't say it said, I should say I got it, that it wasn't that I was afraid of dying as a child going through all these asthma attacks. It was that I was afraid that I wasn't going to get the chance to live.
Wow. Oh, man.
And so that was kind of like why I was like in a big hurry to live fully. You know, my dad used to say when I was like 17 years old, he's like, you've lived more of a life than I have.
Wow.
Like, I've traveled I've been like traveling all around the world, snowboarding, like going to all these foreign countries and doing all this stuff. You know, by the time I'm like 19, I've been to like a lot of different countries, you know, and he's never even been to Europe.
Right.
And it was like I was just in a big hurry to be like successful and like, you know, be somebody, I guess. And so the ayahuasca essentially allowed me to see that I was dealing with this intense, like, psychological, unconscious drive, and that I was basically addicted to scaring myself.
Whoa, cool.
And the way that it came through in the session was like you can think of it like this. Your asthma has been your living hell, and now you're addicted to scaring the living hell out of yourself.
Wow.
Because you're trying to rid yourself of this like compulsion to like prove that you're capable. And so the way that looked for me was like, get on a snowboard and go flipping and spinning over rocks and like land on your head 6 inches from a boulder, you know?
Right.
Like, or whatever, you know, go ragdolling through the trees and over rocks and just laugh your head off and do it again.
Yeah.
And, but what it showed me was, it was like, because at this time when I first started drinking ayahuasca, I was starting a lot of avalanches.
Okay.
And I was having close calls out in the backcountry, and I didn't really give a shit.
Right.
And in fact, part of me really fucking liked it.
Oh man.
You know, because I was like, because going from being a top level rider on K2 and having all the support you could ever imagine to starting a snowboard company where I'm self-funded, like that was a huge shift for me that I wasn't really prepared for. You know, here in my 21-year-old mind, like all these photographers are pointing their cameras at me because I'm such a great snowboarder.
Right.
But then I got it real quick. They're pointing their cameras at me because K2 will buy the photos.
Right.
And now not only are they, now they don't want to point the camera at me because they're seeing it as a waste of film.
Oh, fuck.
And so it was like a real reality check. And, fast forward 6 years and all of a sudden the Illuminati is like built itself up to the point where we're like got a little bit of funding and we're putting out some movies and we're getting some rad photos. And all of a sudden I'm getting these dramatic shots of starting avalanches and boom, they're getting published.
Right.
And I'm getting all this positive feedback like, oh bro, that's fucking sick. Like, that's amazing. Like, yeah. And so my ego is like, oh, okay. Yeah, this is working. Like, let's keep pushing this edge. Let's keep doing it. And there was kind of like this weekend where I started like 2 pretty significant slides, like 2 days in a row that, we got them on film. We got still photos of them. They were run in magazines. They were in movies, all this stuff. And it scared the shit out of me.
Right.
And all of a sudden I'm doing all this ayahuasca work, and it basically showed me, it was like, look, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to die. And it was like, you aren't supposed to die, like, yet. You got other stuff to do on this planet. And the reason you're doing what you're doing is because of all this trauma and these psychological complex that you've got going on. And you can work through this in a different way. It's like, sit in ayahuasca ceremony, work with your fear, work with your issues, and you can go way further. And you're not going to be at risk of dying.
Wow.
And it was like, if you want to experience dying, you can do it in an ayahuasca ceremony.
Totally.
And you'll be able to like come back into the world like a different person with something else to offer. And when I got that in that ceremony, I basically like went home and closed my snowboard company.
Oh, wow.
And I was basically just like, it didn't feel pure. Essentially what I learned by running a snowboard company, other than like a lot about the internet and a lot about graphic design and web development and search engine marketing, was that I love riding a snowboard and that I don't love running a business in the industry called snowboarding.
I love that sentence. That's going to be the opening of every episode next year. You just summed it up. I never loved the industry. I loved people like yourself that were like standout snowboarders with a lot of talent, a lot of style, and getting exposure because you're that good. You know what I mean? There's a component of the snowboard industry that creates this machine that, you know, makes you the guy that photographers want to shoot with because you've got the right sponsors and because those sponsors are buying the right ads and all that stuff. But without the skill that you had, you wouldn't have been that guy. So I just wanted to put that out there. Also, fuck, you just blew my mind. That's the thing about psychedelics, and anyone who's dabbled and had a little mushroom trip here or there, that feeling of like, oh my God, I gotta not forget this. I have to remember everything is one. You know, the trees are alive. The earth is something that we don't experience through our ego. The ego actually closes our experiences of what's really actually happening. I don't think I've had a DMT trip where I didn't have a 24-hour period afterwards that I was like, I just get it. You know, the infinite is, you know, you ask some regular ego question and you go, well, that's because I don't know. I don't want to sound arrogant, but it gives you a sense of confidence in understanding what's going on this planet that you don't get very often from just regular life. You know, you can get it from reading books and stuff. You can get it from, you could spend a lot of time in self-development and see the results, but holy smokes,
Yeah, I think it's part of our Western world. It takes a lot of work to get there.
Yeah.
Without the psychedelics.
Yeah. It's like kind of this shortcut that's like, ooh, I'd like to be like that all the time. Jeez, that would be like, and I feel like it would be like a positive input on the planet to be like that. You know what I mean? To understand.
You know, it is. I think it is. And, you know, one of the most profound things that I've realized through many, many years now of drinking in circles is that, like, this is the experience. Like, life is the big experience. You know, you get checked out of your body and you go, like, download the Akashic records or see some cosmic wheel in the sky, and you have all sorts of, you know, amazing out-of-body experiences, but without the body and without this world to, like, relate it to, it's pretty meaningless.
Yep. So
it's given me a lot more appreciation just for being alive.
Yeah, bro.
And being okay with you know, whatever's happening.
Lance Pitman, man, I'm gonna end it here. I want to thank you on behalf of myself, the podcast listeners, the snowboard community, just for being yourself, dude. You're fucking awesome.
Well, thanks. You know, it's cool to hear that, and you know, it's still going in a way. You know, I took 10 years off, and then I decided to come back and be the head snowboard coach here for a few years so that I could kind of tap back in and feel like I was giving back a little bit to this, you know, thing that was just such a huge part of my life. And you know, my love of snowboarding has changed, but it hasn't gone away.
Rad.
You know, I guess it's just like big fist bump to all the kids out there that are strapping it on and getting stoked.
Fuck yeah, Lance.
Anytime.
FNRad shoutouts this week to Mac up at Cypress Bowl. Thanks for the lift ticket, man. I want to thank all the listeners who've been sending me messages about the show and the guests and me finding my voice. Right on, guys. Feels good to know you're listening and enjoying what I'm doing. Thanks again to Wired Snowboards, Dekine, Vans, The Boardroom in Vancouver, and Tribute Board Shop in beautiful Nelson, BC. Extra special thanks to Grouse and Nate Muson from the Not Snowboarding Podcast. Thanks for the shred soles, man. You've made it right to the end of the show, so thanks for listening. It really helps us grow if you share the episodes with people who'd like to hear this kind of thing. It gets our name out there. Be sure to come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboarding Podcast, brought to you by SIA Productions.